I'd sold paintings. I'd sold lots of paintings locally uh, to wonderful people who were supportive in Sacramento and other places. But these newer paintings, uh, they were troubling to people, and understandably so. Pies and cakes and hot dogs, those things. So Allan Stone, the dealer, was very puzzled by them, and it took him a year or two to get to a point of saying, before I got the courage to show the damn thing, is the way he put it. And that's quite a mark of his ability and loyalty to take me on and see what he could do. But we really didn't have very many hopes. He said to me, I think you're a good painter. I don't know about these, but we'll show them. And we'll show them, I'll try to get a plan of about 5 to 10 years where we keep showing things of yours in the hope you gain a kind of clientele. And that's what we did. So it was a big shock to find that serendipitously pop art came in, and we were sort of shundled into that sudden, interesting world. That is to say, interesting to the critics, interesting to people. And that's how really it occurred. It was somehow important to me to be honest in what we do and to love what it is we paint. These were lessons given to me by other artists, obviously. To do what you love or are interested in or have some regard for. And it seems to me that it's easy to overlook what we spend our majority of time doing, and that's an intimate association with everyday things. Putting on our shoes, tying our ties, eating our breakfast, cooking our meals, washing our dishes. And somehow that ongoing human activity seems to me very much worth doing. It's only when we become presumptive, I think, to think we're better than that and would like to be and should think of ourselves being better, that we begin to ignore those things. But in a wonderful way, children remind us of it. They go to the gumball machines with their little penny and put it in and say, look, Dad, look what came out of this terrible looking thing. This magenta, sweet little world of wonder. And that to me is as good as we get. Bakeries and display people are very good at making them look almost transcendent. Just like they do with diamonds. I mean, how many lights they put on them to make them sparkle so much. Or used car places where they have that row of lights to light them up and make them sparkle. It has to do with the kind of tradition of painting, of orchestrating a single shape into its various configurative potentials. If you look closely, they look all alike at first until you examine them, and each one is curiously different in some minor way. And that orchestrating principle you can find all through the tradition in the history of painting, because it's an obvious design concept. And it's like a drum beat, you know, slight variation, repetition, rhythms, and so on. After all, they're trained in the same school as the fine artists. And they're very, very good at what they do, and they're very artful in what they do. We still, I think, haven't got the categories fully straightened out about fine art and commercial art. We like to think we have, but I don't know. It's proven to be actually now that American illustrators of a certain quality are commanding very high prices all of a sudden because they're so damn special. And if the character of art doesn't contain the idea of specialness, rare achievement in a certain limited convention, then I think we've got it wrong. If we don't celebrate anything which makes and comes to these rare achievements. Very much so, central. It's what Gloria Steinem identifies as the most revolutionary human emotion, that is empathy. And since the body is the measure of empathy, it's crucially central to the kind of critical concern about the inner workings of a painting. Its thrusts, its spatial illusionism, the coherence with which we judge balance, symmetry, tension, grace. Those are all based on the body, its feel, extremities, those kinds of things. If you're not participating with your body when you're looking at a painting, whether it's a Cezanne, which has to do with a kind of equivocation, ambiguity, a sense of alternation, or in the case of someone like Velázquez, where the physical attributes of his painting, the knowledge that he's showing you and the feeling which he's expressing, that's all about the body. Whether it's sitting well, a state of tension, whether that heel really feels like it's gripping the ground or expressing that contact. All of those we measure really by, in my judgment, the body and its issues. That's why I have difficulty in convincing students to stand when they paint rather than sit, for instance. There's a real difference in the character of gesticulation and locations, things like that. Lots of books, but I wasn't a great student or a great reader until quite late. I was bored at school, and so that wasn't something I could get any interest in, to the disgust, I think, of my teachers who were always sending notes home. Wayne is not dumb, but he won't do anything. So that was a real misfortune, actually, and to my disgrace, I came to learning very late in the sense of literature or all the things I later began to treasure. I don't like the term artist. It's a term which I'm uncomfortable with, but I love the idea of being a cartoonist, a draftsman, a designer, a painter. Those are things which we make clear, objective information about. So the idea of becoming particularly something or pursuing being a fine artist came very, very late, and came by way of examples of those people who I became somewhat aware of their extraordinary achievements. It began really with cartoonists. A great example would have been George Harriman, the creator of Crazy Cat. extraordinary man and extraordinary artist. When you use the term artist, then you're talking about the highest achievement within each of those categories. But then slowly, all of the painters, I read a book which meant a lot to me, Van Loon's Artist Lives, talking about Rembrandt and those kinds of people. I never imagined myself ever even getting to a point of where I might be able to pursue those things. But I still had this awe of artists and began to go to museums a lot, read more, particularly biographies and artist biographies. So as I say, I came to it quite late. I was still in high school, actually, but I found out about it and went up actually to study sign painting. They taught cooking and sign painting, carpentry, plumbing, mechanics. But it was a great trade school, and they taught these kids these opportunities. And among it was a couple of really lovely former commercial artists. One, a woman designer, dress designer, fashion illustrator, and another, an old guy that had been kicking around art service groups, commercial art groups. And both of them very patiently would take us kids and show us how to do things. And it was a marvelous chance for, I think I was 16 at the time. It just showed you very practical ways to do things, how to put a hat on a head, how to find the sole of a shoe and build the shoe up from that, or to think about advertising posters and all of its consequences. Very exciting stuff. And I just wanted to be a red-hot advertising art director from then on. Worked for quite a number of advertising agencies. Rexall was the main one until I went to New York. And that was a great opportunity. And that's, of course, where I met a very important person to me, Robert Mallory. He was pursuing fine art, even though he was working as a commercial artist. And he's the first one who showed me how dumb I was and how I'd better get myself together if I was going to take seriously the idea of doing anything. But as I expressed an interest in fine art at that time, because I'd been going to museums, he really gave me my first serious critical confrontation with how hard you had to work, how you had not to expect much, because you were dealing with a tradition which was an extraordinary community of excellence. So you prepared yourself, and you should say to yourself, I'm lucky to be in this community of excellence, and you may not do very much, but it should be serious, well-intentioned, and highly critical. And he was one of the most extraordinary formalist critics to this day I've ever met. I was lucky because, in some ways, the state college systems at that time were just sort of forming. And they gave me credit by special examination for the portfolio I'd developed. So I sort of got through the art part sort of uneducated, but the other part, the literate part, and the kind of fundamental college courses were very important to me, and that's what I sort of concentrated on to get a degree, with the idea that I could then maybe become a teacher. And I gave up the idea of becoming a commercial artist and tried then to begin to become a teacher. And a painter. I have no idea. I think maybe there can be issues where examples can be shown of maybe how to work, how to think, how to criticize, and the challenge of not doing something which is known, but something which is unknown. And I think creativity is a very mysterious idea. But if you are interested in creativity, then I think the fundamentals of learning and criticizing are essential. If you're engaged, as you say, you're working theoretically so hard that you are willing to make mistakes. And you know that doing something once is never enough. And as Degas says, if you start drawing, be sure you draw 10 times, correct it over and over again, even 100 times, to get to that ballet slipper fitting on the shoe properly. In that instance, I think you don't think of creativity so much, because what you're doing is creating all the time. Some of it not very good, but it's a creation nonetheless, and the nerve of failure, I think, is paramount. I'm one sort of against mysteriousness about painting, but it's there somewhere. But when you think about it, painting itself is a kind of miracle, because what you're doing is reducing a three-dimensional world of living, active, organized chaos into this little, flat, unmoving, quiet, flat thing, which has to, in some ways, be able to speak to you. Puzzling and curiously unreal. Something which you never, ever would think of it ever occurring. Dangerous in the sense of over-celebration, unreal in terms of value structure, obviously going to change. If we look carefully, if we're interested at all, that stock market interest goes up and down like the stock market, sometimes to disastrous results in many instances. So it's I think, fascinating phenomena, interesting, but very puzzling and very temporary, I think. I think for any painters that I admire and interested in, which occupy positions of achievements in a consensus way, most of them are kind of always hanging on by their fingertips, hoping that the next painting will be better, or that they can finally get that vision that they have in their mind. I think it's the quest and the challenge that keeps you going. When you get to a point of where you can do something somehow that you feel you can do and you anticipate the end result, it's no longer very interesting. You've got to, I think, risk making a terrible painting or a terrible idea and see what you can do with it. And it's often disastrous. I mean, if you can get one painting out of 12 or 15, that's a very high batting average. and you better look to yourself to be a little bit more edited. And you see, one of the problems with painters is we don't have editors like you do. And we know, and you know, how important editors are and have been. So we then have to, I think, really do move to critical confrontation in order to somehow hopefully ensure that you're not degrading your work, being repetitive, becoming a kind of art world employee where you're expected to make these light manufacturing products. I think that's a kind of death. I had no interest at all because I thought the commercial artist was much better than he was, and still feel that way. I think the lessons and the influence and the quality of pop art has to be seriously addressed in reality. Because those people who gave them their appropriation styles, which they took, as they admit, those people deserve also a great deal of credit as great designers, great cartoonists, great photographers. And I think that needs to be addressed in terms of the effect and quality achievement and philosophic equivalent of pop art. I'm a kind of heretic, I guess, but I'm not very interested in pop art. Well, there are great lessons and great influences, and I've actually stolen things from them. I do try to do what they do. De Kooning, in terms of his premier coup bravura painting, that's a long, long tradition, starting with Velasquez through Manet to Soutine, de Kooning, Manet, where they have to juggle simultaneously several perceptual images at once and make a coalescent form which encases and combines those perceptual nuances all at once. You know, that's why they make so many failures, of course. A single point perspective where you look at a railroad track, that's one system. 2-point perspective is when you have 2-point perspective. Cézanne's painting have 8 or 9 perspectives. Various views of the same still life viewed from several angles and trying to incorporate that into one. Chinese perspective, which is the opposite of 1-point perspective, where instead of the railroad tracks vanishing, they're coming in to you. And to orchestrate those into one entity is a wonderful challenge and a great treat to fool around with. Mostly unsuccessful, but wonderfully exciting. Back into the studio and began just to use these various paintings from various points of view and I was trying to get the feeling of equilibrium and disequilibrium, because you feel that in, I think, San Francisco. It's hard to imagine how those cars can stay on the street or buildings can suddenly thrust themselves up on a kind of what seems to be an earth mound, you know, just makes you feel this can't work. So that was very much a part, at least, of the ideas I wanted to try to get into it. Well, I think it has to do again with what we talked about with body empathy. It helps to enliven. What you have to do with a painting is to enliven it with your body, to feel its tensions, to feel its dislocation, or to feel its comfort. Gee, this feels really stable, for instance. On the other hand, if it's a little too stable, it can die on you. So it's a wonderful tightrope walk. What fascinates me is what you can do about the light, creating light in painting. And I get my impetus from that, not from light, oddly enough, but from the tradition of painting, particularly in Bonnard, Matisse, the German expressionists, Indian miniature painting, Chinese painting, where the light is created by the interaction of colors, value, hue, and intensity. I'm essentially a kind of self-educated person, I guess, but I think everybody is. That's the way we really learn. In other words, you see examples and so on. But I didn't ever go really to a formal art school, for instance, particularly a fine art school. But I would love to have gone. I wanted to go. So in that case, it's possible, I think, not only in America, but every place, to take it on yourself. But that is a part, I think, of the American character in terms of the frontier theory idea, where you make your own hot rod, or you build your own log cabin, or all these instances of hands-on, willing work. I can make it better. I can do it differently. So that is a part, at least for me, of what I do. I think the work for me is very American, although I love all art from whatever country or tradition. I just think that where you live, how you live, and what you take on mostly is this little area of America for me.